For 7 years, Prince Harry believed he knew his wife's story. The cable TV actress who'd charmed him on a blind date, the woman who shared his values and understood his struggles, the partner who'd stood with him through everything. But behind that carefully curated narrative was another story entirely, a hidden world that Meghan never fully disclosed. A past built inside the exclusive walls of Soho House, where memberships cost fortunes and secrets are currency. And now, as Harry begins unveiling the truth about what Meghan really did during those years, what he's discovering is shattering everything he thought he knew. This isn't about tabloid rumors or palace gossip. This is about documented evidence, witness testimony, and financial records that reveal a completely different version of who Meghan was before she became a duchess. Layer by layer, secret by secret, the hidden truth is emerging, and Prince Harry, uncovering it piece by piece, is learning that the woman he married was hiding far more than he ever imagined. This is the unveiling of Meghan Markle's Soho House secrets, and what's being revealed is changing everything. The first layer Harry peeled back was the simplest, a membership card he found while organizing their home office. Soho House, Toronto. Nothing unusual at first glance. Meghan had mentioned being a member when she lived there filming Suits, but Harry noticed something strange. The card's tier level. Black membership, the highest level Soho House offers, access to every location worldwide, priority reservations, VIP treatment at all venues, and a price tag that, Harry knew, exceeded $15,000 annually. Harry did the math. Black memberships across the multiple locations Meghan had accessed, Toronto, London, New York, Los Angeles, would cost over $50,000 per year. On a cable TV salary that maxed out around $300,000 before taxes, that kind of expense made no financial sense, not when you factored in rent, clothes, travel, and all the other costs of maintaining the lifestyle Meghan had been living. So Harry started pulling records, bank statements from the years before they met, credit card bills, travel expenses, and what he found was a pattern that didn't add up. Meghan had been living well beyond her documented income, traveling internationally dozens of times, wearing designer outfits that cost thousands, attending events that required expensive tickets or exclusive access. The numbers didn't work. Someone was funding a lifestyle Meghan couldn't afford on her own. And when Harry started investigating who and why, the first layer of hidden truth began to emerge. Meghan hadn't been paying for her Soho House memberships. They'd been complimentary, free access provided in exchange for something Harry was only beginning to understand. Harry hired a forensic accountant, someone with no connection to the royal family or the media, just a professional tasked with following the money. And what this accountant uncovered was stunning. Between 2013 and 2016, Meghan had received approximately $450,000 in unexplained deposits, money that appeared in her accounts without obvious connection to employment or documented income sources. The deposits came regularly, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, sometimes $20,000 at once. Always from different sources, shell companies, private accounts, business entities that, when traced, connected back to wealthy individuals in Soho House circles. One name appeared more than any other, Ron Burkle, the billionaire investor with known Soho House connections. The accountant traced at least $170,000 flowing from Burkle-connected entities into accounts Meghan controlled during those years. And the timing of these payments was revealing. They coincided with Meghan's travel, with her attendance at exclusive events, with periods when she appeared on yachts or at private gatherings that no cable TV actress should have been able to access. Harry confronted the evidence with disbelief. Meghan had told him she'd lived modestly before they met, that she'd worked hard and saved carefully, that her Suits salary had supported her comfortable but not extravagant lifestyle. But the financial records told a different story. Meghan had been receiving significant money from wealthy benefactors, money that allowed her to move through elite circles, money that positioned her exactly where she needed to be to eventually meet a prince. When Harry asked Meghan directly about these payments, her explanation was vague. She said they were consulting fees for advising on events and networking, that wealthy people often paid for her presence because she brought value to their social gatherings, that it was normal in elite circles to compensate people who facilitated connections and curated experiences. But Harry knew enough about those circles to understand what that meant. Meghan hadn't been a guest at these events. She'd been working them, being paid to make sure the right people met, that influential guests had what they needed, that gatherings ran smoothly without complications. The first layer was unveiled. Meghan's lifestyle before Harry hadn't been funded by acting. It had been funded by wealthy men who valued what she could provide in terms of access, discretion, and facilitation. The second layer Harry uncovered came from an unexpected source. A former Soho House employee in Toronto who'd watched Meghan operate for years and finally decided to speak. This employee, contacted through Harry's private investigator, described a version of Meghan that bore little resemblance to the woman Harry knew. According to this source, Meghan had a specific role at Soho House Toronto. Not official employment, nothing documented, but a functional position as what staff called a social coordinator. She'd arrive at events early, speak with organizers about guest lists and preferences, help position certain people near others who might benefit from meeting, make subtle introductions that seemed casual but were actually strategic, ensure that VIP members received special attention without it appearing arranged. The employee described watching Meghan work a charity gala in 2015. She'd moved through the room with precision, spoken briefly with each major donor, guided conversations toward mutual interests, ensured that potential business partners crossed paths naturally. By the end of the evening, 3 significant deals had been initiated, and Meghan, according to the employee, had been the invisible conductor orchestrating those connections. What made this testimony significant wasn't that Meghan had been good at networking. It was that she'd been doing it professionally, being compensated through free memberships and cash payments to facilitate outcomes that benefited Soho House's wealthy members. She wasn't just attending events, she was working them. Another employee from Soho House London corroborated this pattern. They described seeing Meghan at a 2014 gathering, moving between guests with what they called operational awareness. Not the behavior of someone enjoying a party, the behavior of someone with a job to do. This employee specifically remembered Meghan coordinating with Marcus Anderson, discussing which guests needed attention and which situations required management. The term management stayed with Harry because it implied Meghan hadn't just been making introductions, she'd been handling situations, solving problems, ensuring that whatever happened at these exclusive events stayed private and controlled. The second layer revealed more than Harry wanted to accept. Meghan hadn't been a struggling actress lucky enough to access elite spaces. She'd been part of the operation that made those spaces function, working for powerful people in exchange for access that positioned her to eventually meet someone who could change her life entirely. The third layer Harry unveiled was perhaps the most disturbing. A guest list from a Soho House London event in June 2014, 2 full years before Meghan and Harry had supposedly met for the first time. The list, obtained from archived club records, showed both their names. Prince Harry listed as a VIP guest, Meghan Markle listed under auxiliary staff as an event coordinator. Harry had attended that event. He vaguely remembered it, a charity function at Soho House Dean Street. Nothing particularly memorable. He'd spent a few hours networking, then left. But Meghan had been there, not as a guest, as someone helping run the event. And according to staff who'd worked that evening, Meghan had been very aware of Harry's presence. One former employee, speaking to Harry's investigator, recalled Meghan asking specifically about the royal guest, which entrance he'd use, where he'd likely spend most of his time, what his usual preferences were for drinks and seating. At the time, the employee thought Meghan was just being thorough, ensuring VIP guests received proper attention. But looking back, knowing that Meghan and Harry would later claim to have met for the first time in 2016, the questioning took on different meaning. Meghan had been gathering intelligence about Harry 2 years before their official introduction. Another witness from that event remembered seeing Meghan positioned near where Harry spent most of the evening, not obviously approaching him, but observing, watching his interactions, studying how he moved through the space. The witness said Meghan seemed focused on Harry in a way that stood out from her attention to other guests. When Harry saw evidence of this event, his first reaction was to check with Meghan. Had she been there? Did she remember seeing him? Meghan's response was immediate denial, followed by vague acknowledgement. She said she'd worked many Soho House events during those years and couldn't remember specific guests, that even if Harry had been at some of the same gatherings, she hadn't noticed or didn't recall. But Harry found a photograph, a candid shot from that 2014 event taken for Soho House records, and there in the background, clearly visible, was Meghan, looking directly toward where Harry had been standing. The photo's angle and her positioning made it impossible to believe she hadn't seen him. The third layer was unveiled. Meghan had known about Harry, observed him, and gathered information about him at least 2 years before Marcus Anderson supposedly introduced them on a blind date, which meant the entire foundation story of their relationship, meeting by chance and discovering instant connection, was incomplete at best. The fourth layer emerged from text messages Harry never should have seen. Communications between Meghan and Marcus Anderson from early 2016, months before the blind date that officially brought Meghan and Harry together. The messages had been obtained during a separate legal discovery process and later shared with Harry's investigator. They were authenticated, verified as genuine, and their content was devastating to the narrative Meghan had built. May 2016. Meghan to Marcus. When are you going to make it happen? Marcus. Timing has to be right. He's still processing the last breakup. Meghan. I'm not getting any younger. This needs to happen soon. Marcus. Patience. When it happens, it has to feel organic. Can't seem forced. June 2016. Meghan to Marcus. What's his actual situation? Is he really looking or just playing around? Marcus. He's looking. He's desperate to get out of his situation. Needs someone who makes him feel understood without all the royal pressure. Meghan. I can do that. You know I can. I just need the introduction. Marcus. I know you can. That's why I'm setting it up. But you have to let me control the timing. The messages continued through early July 2016, right up to the week before Meghan and Harry's official first date. And they read like strategic planning, not excited anticipation of a casual blind date. Meghan was pressing for the introduction. Marcus was managing timing and presentation. Both were discussing Harry as an opportunity that needed careful handling. What struck Harry most was Meghan's language. I'm not getting any younger. This needs to happen soon. I can do that. She wasn't talking about meeting someone she might connect with. She was talking about securing an outcome she'd been waiting for. And Marcus's responses confirmed he understood his role. He wasn't just introducing two people he thought might get along. He was positioning Meghan to meet someone he knew she'd been targeting. The fourth layer revealed what Harry had been dreading. His relationship with Meghan hadn't been fate or chance. It had been coordinated, planned, executed with timing and presentation designed to make something strategic feel organic. The blind date that changed his life had been anything but blind. The fifth layer Harry unveiled came from witness testimony that seemed almost too perfect to believe. An executive who'd attended a private Soho House gathering in March 2016, 4 months before Meghan and Harry's official meeting. This executive had been standing near Meghan when she was speaking with Marcus Anderson and another man identified only as a consultant connected to Soho House operations. And according to this witness, Meghan said something that would have seemed delusional at the time, but became prophetic in retrospect. The witness recalled Meghan saying, "By fall, I'll be dating Prince Harry, and by this time next year, I'll be engaged." The consultant had laughed, asked if Meghan had even met Harry. Meghan responded, "Not officially, but I know enough about him to know we're compatible, and Marcus knows how to make the introduction happen naturally." Marcus, according to the witness, didn't contradict her, didn't suggest she was being unrealistic. Instead, he'd said, "If we do this right, no one will ever know it was planned." The witness filed the conversation away as bizarre rich people fantasy until Meghan and Harry's relationship went public that fall, exactly matching Meghan's timeline. And their engagement came the following year, precisely as she'd predicted. When this witness came forward, Harry initially dismissed the testimony as fabricated, too convenient, too perfectly aligned with suspicious theories about Meghan's intentions. But the investigator verified the witness's presence at that event, confirmed their identity and credibility, found no financial motivation or connection to media that would explain fabrication. The witness was legitimate, and their account matched too many other pieces of evidence to dismiss. Meghan had been predicting her relationship with Harry months before they'd supposedly met, speaking about it with certainty rather than hope. And Marcus Anderson had been confirming that he could engineer the introduction in a way that would seem natural rather than arranged. The fifth layer was unveiled. Meghan's relationship with Harry hadn't been a dream that happened to come true. It had been a plan she'd discussed openly with the person who had power to make it happen. And that plan had then executed exactly as she'd predicted. The sixth layer Harry discovered might have been the most calculated of all: the Diana perfume. Multiple independent sources confirmed that at Meghan's first date with Harry, she'd worn a very specific fragrance. Not a modern scent, not one of her usual perfumes, but the exact fragrance that had been Princess Diana's signature scent. A smell Harry would recognize instantly, a scent tied to his deepest childhood memories and his most profound grief. Harry remembered that first date with painful clarity now. He'd been struck by something familiar about Meghan, a comfort he couldn't identify but felt deeply. He'd interpreted it as chemistry, as some kind of spiritual connection, as the universe signaling that this woman was special. But now, understanding that Meghan had deliberately worn his dead mother's signature perfume to trigger that emotional response, the memory felt violated, manipulative. An investigator had spoken to people who'd known Meghan before she met Harry, asked about her typical perfume choices, and none of them identified the Diana fragrance as something Meghan regularly wore. Her signature scents were completely different: modern, light, floral notes that bore no resemblance to Diana's classic choice, which meant Meghan had specifically selected that perfume for her first date with Harry, had made a deliberate choice to wear something she didn't normally use because she understood the psychological impact it would have. The investigator found evidence that Meghan had researched Diana extensively in the months before meeting Harry. Articles saved about Diana's fashion, notes about Diana's charity work, photographs of Diana collected in Meghan's apartment, and among those research materials, references to Diana's favorite perfume. This wasn't coincidence. This was preparation. Meghan had studied what would resonate with Harry emotionally, had identified that scent triggers the strongest memory and emotion responses, had calculated that wearing his mother's signature fragrance would create an instant sense of familiar comfort. And she'd been right. Harry had felt that comfort, had interpreted it as destiny, had never questioned why a woman he'd just met felt like home. The sixth layer revealed a level of psychological strategy that Harry found almost impossible to accept, because it meant Meghan hadn't just positioned herself to meet him, she'd engineered the first impression to trigger emotional responses that would make him more likely to fall for her. She'd weaponized his grief about his mother to create manufactured connection. The seventh layer came from palace archives, a security report that Harry had never been shown. During Meghan's vetting process before their wedding, royal security had conducted comprehensive background checks, standard procedure for anyone joining the family, and those checks had identified multiple concerns. The report, which Harry's private security team obtained through confidential channels, was extensive. 47 pages of documented findings about Meghan's background, associations, and financial history. It noted her complimentary Soho House memberships and questioned how she'd obtained them. It documented her relationship with Marcus Anderson and his connections to individuals with questionable backgrounds. It identified the financial gap between her income and expenses and flagged unexplained deposits totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars. It specifically mentioned Ron Burkle and his known associations with problematic networks. It noted Meghan's presence at events connected to individuals the palace would normally distance itself from, and it recommended delaying the wedding until these matters could be investigated further. The report didn't accuse Meghan of wrongdoing, but it identified patterns that warranted examination, discrepancies that needed explanation, associations that presented potential security and reputational risks. And the recommendation was clear: further investigation required before proceeding. But that report had been buried. Senior palace officials, terrified of being accused of racism, had decided that raising concerns about Meghan's background was too dangerous, that the optics of blocking a biracial woman from joining the family would be devastating. So they'd suppressed the report, classified it, told Harry that Meghan's vetting came back clean with no significant concerns, and they'd allowed the wedding to proceed with Harry never knowing that his own security apparatus had identified red flags. Reading that report years later, Harry felt betrayed from multiple directions. His family had lied to him, hidden information he had a right to know. But Meghan had also been less than forthcoming, because every concern in that report represented something she'd never fully disclosed. Every question raised was something she'd deflected or dismissed. The seventh layer was unveiled. Both the palace and Meghan had kept Harry in the dark. One by hiding what they'd found, the other by not being entirely truthful about what there was to find. The eighth layer emerged from Meghan's own past statements, now viewed through the lens of everything Harry had discovered. In interviews and in private conversations with Harry, Meghan had consistently claimed she'd never Googled Harry before meeting him, that she'd known almost nothing about him or the royal family, that she'd gone into their first date with no real awareness of who he was beyond a prince. But that claim was now impossible to believe, because Meghan had been at events with Harry 2 years before their official introduction, had asked staff about his preferences and patterns, had researched Diana extensively, including identifying her signature perfume, had discussed Harry with Marcus Anderson in strategic terms months before they met, had predicted their relationship timeline with precision. Someone who knows nothing about a person doesn't do any of those things. Someone who's researched, observed, and planned does. Harry went back through Meghan's interviews, found the clip where she'd told the BBC she didn't know much about him, found the conversation where she'd claimed she'd never been interested in the royal family, found the moments where she'd presented herself as someone who'd stumbled into a fairy tale rather than someone who'd positioned herself to create one. Every statement was now revealed as, at minimum, incomplete, at worst, deliberately misleading. And the pattern of these misstatements wasn't random. They all served the same purpose: to present Meghan as someone things happened to, rather than someone who made things happen, to maintain the narrative of organic romance rather than strategic positioning, to hide the level of research and planning that had gone into creating what Harry thought was spontaneous connection. The eighth layer unveiled a pattern of dishonesty that Harry could no longer ignore. Meghan had been less than truthful about fundamental aspects of how their relationship started. And if she'd been dishonest about that, what else hadn't she been entirely truthful about? The ninth layer Harry uncovered was perhaps the most personal: the vision board. 3 separate individuals who'd been in Meghan's Toronto apartment during her Suits years all described the same thing: a large board covered with images and goals, and prominently featured on that board were photos related to the British royal family. One source, a former friend, described the board in detail: Princess Diana photos, images of royal events, pictures of Windsor Castle and Kensington Palace, and, according to this source, multiple photographs of Prince Harry himself, Harry at charity events, Harry in military dress, Harry with children at Invictus. The friend said Meghan had explained it as visualization practice, that she believed in manifesting goals by focusing on them daily, that the royal imagery represented her aspiration for significance and impact. At the time, the friend thought it was harmless fantasy, the kind of ambitious dreaming lots of people engage in. But looking back, knowing that Meghan would later be engaged to the exact prince she'd been visualizing, the board seemed less like fantasy and more like a target. A second source, someone who helped Meghan move apartments, confirmed seeing royal-themed materials on a board or wall display. Couldn't remember exact details, but specifically recalled thinking it was unusual that Meghan seemed so focused on the British royal family when she was Canadian resident working American television. A third source, a casual acquaintance who'd visited Meghan's apartment once, remembered the board as well. Said it stood out because among all the images, the photos of Prince Harry were particularly numerous. Said it seemed like Meghan had a specific interest in him rather than just general royal fascination. Meghan has consistently denied this vision board existed, called it a malicious rumor created to make her seem calculating, insisted she had normal vision boards focused on career and personal growth, but nothing related to royalty. But three independent sources who don't know each other and have nothing obvious to gain from lying all described seeing the same thing, and their accounts, while not identical, aligned on the key details. Royal imagery, Diana photos, specific focus on Harry. Harry didn't know what to believe, but he knew that completely dismissing three separate witnesses required assuming they were all lying or all misremembering in the exact same way. And that seemed less likely than the uncomfortable alternative, that Meghan had been visualizing a relationship with him years before they met and simply didn't want to admit how focused that visualization had become. The ninth layer revealed something Harry found deeply unsettling: the possibility that he'd been a target rather than a partner, that Meghan had identified him as a goal and worked systematically toward achieving that goal while making it all seem like chance and chemistry. The 10th and final layer Harry unveiled was the pattern itself. Taken individually, each discovery could potentially be explained away. Comped memberships as industry courtesy, financial support as legitimate consulting, prior event attendance as coincidence, strategic texts as just friends discussing dating, the Diana perfume as innocent choice, the buried report as palace overreach, past statements as simplified for public consumption, the vision board as exaggerated rumors. Each piece alone could be questioned, deflected, or dismissed, but together they formed a pattern Harry could no longer ignore, a pattern of strategic positioning, careful planning, and deliberate manipulation. A pattern that showed Meghan hadn't stumbled into meeting a prince, she'd engineered it. Harry sat with all the evidence, all the testimony, all the financial records and text messages and photographs, and he had to accept what seemed undeniable. Meghan had targeted him, had researched him, had positioned herself through Soho House circles to be exactly where she needed to be, had worked with Marcus Anderson to time an introduction that would seem natural rather than arranged, had prepared for that introduction by studying what would appeal to him emotionally, had worn his mother's perfume to trigger comfort and familiarity, had predicted their relationship timeline months in advance, and had hidden all of this while telling a fairy tale about blind dates and instant connection. The unveiling was complete, and what stood revealed was a woman Harry thought he knew, built on foundations he'd never fully understood. Not necessarily a villain, not necessarily someone with malicious intent, but someone who'd been far less than honest about who she was, what she'd done, and how their relationship had really started. And for Harry, who'd given up everything based on trusting Meghan completely, this unveiled truth was devastating, because it meant the most important relationship of his life had been built on incomplete honesty, that the woman he'd defended against the world had been protecting secrets that would have changed his choices, that the love story he'd believed in might have been engineered from the beginning. The unveiling of Meghan Markle's Soho House secrets has revealed a hidden truth Prince Harry is still struggling to accept. Not because it's unbelievable, but because believing it means questioning everything. The love, the choices, the sacrifices, all of it now exists in the shadow of secrets that were kept and truths that were hidden. And Harry, confronting this unveiled reality, must decide what to do with knowledge he can never unknow.